So, all right, we'll get started.
Yeah, cheers. I got my Joe. See?
All right, so thank you again. This is Chance Davis with the Joke Point. I have a special guest today, Ed Roman, award-winning singer, songwriter. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this episode with me.
Well, Chance, we're old buddies. I mean, grade school, and that time we got in trouble for throwing snowballs, Humor is the key. Always levity. Always levity, even in the face of danger and fear.
I agree. So for the audience, if you can give a brief description of kind of what you do with your songs and how you got started in music.
Yeah, well, I'm Ed Roman, as you said, and I'm here in beautiful, snowy, cold Canada in mid-Ontario. I'm from a little town called Markham originally. I grew up there. It was a blessed childhood, creeks to play at, barns to play in, forts we built, and music for me at a very early age was something I gravitated to because I struggled a lot academically with dyslexia. And after a lot of testing and special class, that's where people call me Special Ed and where that nickname came from. My mom sort of sought, a guitar because she saw I was very inclined to being creative with this old piano that we had in the house and stuff like that. So music for me was a way to break out of my shell and really think about what I wanted to say without all the rules and regulations of being continually corrected and struggling. And because of that, and growing up at that time frame, instead of having a phone or a computer, a guitar, a drum kit, a bass, that was the magic that you were lucky enough to get your hands on. And then jamming with buddies and hanging out and learning and having those early experiences made me really realize this is what I wanted to do because I felt so good doing it. And I loved sharing those moments with people, whether it was on a stage or at a campfire or a house party. It didn't matter what it was. So I pursued it. I went to college and I studied music. And I've been teaching, actually, for 25 years. I've been a music teacher. But that whole time playing in bands, a wide spectrum of music, from jazz, African music, funk, folk, R&B, disco troops, like anything, cover bands that were doing all kinds of stuff. I've always been writing, and I had my own unit for the longest time that was called Special Ed and the Musically Challenged. And the idea was we were challenging ourselves with the music we were writing, and in many ways challenging our audience because, it was compared to Fish meets Frank Zappa. Almost like, it's kind of heady, forward, thinking kind of progressive music. But I love all kinds. And in the last 10 years of my life, I've been writing everything from gypsy, folk, jazz music, spoken word. It doesn't matter because what I've learned inside of all this experience and life for that matter is that prejudices hold us back from so many life experiences. And music is the same way. I'm, as a kid, you can't help but not have your idols and be, steadfast and I'm going to be a jazz musician or I'm going to be a da-da-da-da-da. But really, that's good to have that. It pushes you. But like Mingus said, and other of my mentors from the past, Charles Mingus, it's all music. Ellington would say the same thing. It's two kinds of music, man. Good music and bad music. If it comes from the heart and it means something, then that's what when it strikes you, even as the listener, or as it's humbling in that moment, as the writer, realizing, wow, this is sort of special, what's happening here. So I try to look for that in a lot of music, music that I listen to, the music that comes to me. For me, the artistic experience, just like life, you never know what's going to be thrown at you and how you have to perceive it or come at it, And it's the same thing with teaching. I've learned that through teaching, that nobody learns at the same rate. And having a learning disability myself, understand that it requires a creative mind in order to be able to teach people correctly or understand how they need to be given the information and how they use it. So a lot of my music has to deal with that. It's a socio-political kind of overtone to what I do. But at the same time, as I said, always levity. There's a lot of humor and sarcasm in my points and my statements and what I'm trying to make. Because, humor is like a weapon to me. I was lucky enough to see like great comedians like George Carlin And, you know, I'd leave his concerts, my stomach would be like in pain from laughing so hard. But I guarantee you for weeks after, I'd be thinking about that information. It's because of the way that he presented it. And I guess that's, you know, the intent behind my writing today is as intense as it can be. I'm still trying to, you know, reassure people with a loving hand that there's a way to deal with this and other problems that you might have in your life. So, you know, it's me. I'm the music, and music is me. It's something I've always done and will continue, as I say, till they, you know, put me in the ground.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always saw music as kind of therapy, whether I was in the gym and it was motivating me to work out harder, or if I was in some kind of life struggle and I listened to it and it made me feel better. And I remember, like, in my early days in the military, I always told myself I was going to learn the drums when I got out. And I kind of see music in that creative realm as, you know, from soldier, you're kind of tasked to do your job and you think in that linear platform, and then like music and drawing, different things that I had passions for prior to the military, I kind of shut them off when I joined. And so I've seen music has been more therapeutic now, leaving the military. I know you teach music out of your garage as well for a school, don't you?
Yeah, well, for years, I mean, I moved from school to school, from the Mozart College of Music to a private school in the city to the conservatory that's here in Alliston, to then going, you know what, I kind of want to take on mentorship kind of teaching ideas with kids that are making the transition between, I want to go to college and university to study this, and mentor them into their adjudication process and get them to the next level. And for me, I remember a lot of special teachers, too, in particular, that really helped me at that point. And I realized how when somebody, you know, it's one thing to have, I love the whole experience, but, you know, sometimes a 10 or 15-year-old is coming because they just want to fool around. But when somebody really is passionate about it on that level, I feel that's like kind of one of my callings, too, to help them get there. So, you know, I get that. And, you know, like you said, you know, sometimes you got to shut things off in your life. I mean, for years and years, this past 2 years has been an incredible leap for me with this connection in the U.S., playing so much music, going from Texas to New York in the past year, multiple awards, tons of reviews. It's been my time when the iron is hot to strike. So, you know, I can always go back to teaching, you know, that's not an issue. So, and we're always learning every day. So, you know, keep an open head about it, right?
Exactly. Let's see. So on Veterans Day, you released "Lay One Down," I believe it was.
Yeah, it's Jill Powell from Project Lips, as well as Heart Songs for Veterans. She had approached me because I was playing down in New Jersey for a while and doing some work at Cape May and stuff. And it's crazy what's going on down there, with the weather and stuff. But anyway, they were looking for acoustic music to have that overtone that would, you know, suggest these kinds of thoughts and feelings about veterans or their situations that they've been in, you know. And it's ironic because I wrote the tune before she had asked me, and I'm in the process of recording it for a new record for the spring of 2016. The record's called Red Omen, which is an anagram of my own name. But at the same time, in this last 2 years, as I said, being in the U.S., and also the people that have connected me to my situations in the U.S. are all vets. They're like, you know, a special forces guy here in Canada that was coming to watch me at this local pub. And, you know, he's got a lot of problems because of his post experience and dealing with that, watching it and feeling for him. I'm like, you know, I can't help but not think about that somehow in the message. And at the same time, like art, as I mentioned, it starts to show itself in multiple ways in your life, and family members that were going through personal struggles, all of that sort of circumnavigated this whole topic. And then when I think about the lyrics, it's so easily taken as like, like the opening line, if I see my brother's been falling, like a band of brothers, help your brother up, he's in trouble, fight for your brother. And at the same time, there is this metaphorical aspect to the lyrics that's suggesting that inside of this aggression, as hard as it is for people to talk about, that you know, negative reaction, every action has an equal reaction, and to keep doing this to not only ourselves, innocent people, the people that like you that I greatly respect for putting your life on the line to protect other people and for the consequences of it. And really, because a big part of me, and as I haven't explained, comes from a very political background. My father was the mayor of our local town for 30 some odd years. He was the first federal coalition candidate ever in the history of Canadian federal politics. He was asked to run by the populace of our riding as an independent, and he won. And he was also police commissioner for 14 years and commissioner of York Region for 6 years. And this is the entire time fighting multiple sclerosis and a battle. And the fact that he did these things was incredible. But the endearing moments that I had with my father in conversation, and this is what's interesting about my dad, is that he would always vent and talk to his family about, just like he would to people that would walk in his office because his door was always open. And he hated the word politics because he considered himself a public servant. But those opinions mattered to him. And when he saw the type of corporate coercion that was even going on back in 1984 with certain lobbyist groups and things like that, he gave fair warning to a lot of us and our opinions about this. And now today, many years later, it's hard to believe, 23 years, there's so many things that he said to me that are almost coming true, like in a prophetic way, to the state of the way that we live our lives and the way that we communicate and the way that we jump on these reaction moments. And he wasn't an ignorant man in order to be able to pay attention to this and realize it. So a lot of that steadfast common sense philosophy, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it must be a duck, mentality, I think needs to exist more in our behavior. And some of even the vets that I've spoken to in the last little while are like, man, do you know what's going on? Like, we have, like, in some cases, no control. Like, dude, my services, like, overseas were, like, I was looking after a corporation oil rig. Like, all of those things make me question the higher motive behind the actions. So I can't help but not write about it. It's what we're experiencing now as people. It's pointless in this day and age to me to write something that's just, pish posh or check out my pants. And, I have humor in what I do and talk about, but it's not necessarily to that level, right? So that's what the song was really geared to be, and it being on the new record, the Red Omen, the duality of the lyrics, the duality of the meaning of the record, the duality of how we feel about love and hate in this day and age that we live in. It's all a choice. It's all a choice. And because, again, I'm so attuned to Aboriginal communities and spend time living with them, the old thing of the Cree proverb is, the grandson comes to the grandfather and he says, why is there good and evil in the world? And the grandfather says, because in every human heart, there's a good wolf and a bad wolf. And the boy says, well, who wins? And the grandfather says, it all depends on what you feed, my son. And it's the power of the force, the good side, the bit of Darth versus, Anakin, it's the same thing. It's what we choose to embrace that keeps feeding that. And it's so hard. It's so hard for people to see. Because there's so many types of dogmas, rules, and regulations that restrict us on that prejudiced level. Sorry, it's crazy and philosophical, but it's what I'm passionate about.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I think I posted about that today. How you can't have a negative mindset and have a positive life, and how we choose what happens in your life. And there's been a lot of times post-military where I'll try and figure out the times that I was the happiest, like what did I do in that moment? I was around happy people. I probably laughed. I ate something that was healthy. And a lot of times I relate it to what I listen to. Like if I'm in a bad mood, I'm probably listening to really rough rock music, or if I'm in a good mood, I'm listening to Boney James, B.B. King. And so for me, I started to realize more recently how much music affects my mood. And my mood affects what I do that day. What I do that day affects what I did that week, and it's like this ongoing circle, but I get to choose what I put into it. And so I had to force myself more recently to start listening to more positive music, where the message is something progressive, something uplifting. It has a good beat. I can vibe with it.
Right.
And I never really looked at music that way before, but coming back for my military service, I just was angry. I had a lot of emotions that I didn't know how to deal with, and music I would relate to. Like there's a popular band a lot of military guys let follow, Five Finger Death Punch. Like a lot of their songs, I feel I came back and I felt like nobody understood me. Like I was this different creature almost. And then I'd listen to one of their songs. I'm like, yes, somebody gets it. And so music has been huge therapy for me, and I know for a lot of people I served with, they feel the same way.
Well, and you have the intelligence, my friend, to be able to recognize it. That's one of the biggest things, the conundrums, and why so many people self-medicate and do things when they're in those processes. When I was doing music therapy for 4 years, I was, it was with younger kids, but I was always, never cease to amaze me how the issues that they had and those levels of anxiety because nobody understood them led them into those areas. And this is another reason why, as a private music teacher for so many years, and what I've seen in 25 years in terms of music and the arts, for that matter, being removed from the public system, including agriculture. Because growing food is, just like you said, healthy food. Those times you remember in your life of feeling revitalized because of those, that's a big part of it. And, it's funny, I was watching a Kennedy speech today and a bunch of other people talking about similar things. And that is the baseline factor. If society is not healthy on a physical and mental level because of the continual stress button, that's the fight or flight mechanism. Of course, we're going to have so many issues on that level. And what's not right about mental health is that through the diagnosis of whatever these issues are, that it's placated by medicines when really people need to experience existence and find their path to be able to do those kinds of things. One of the things where I was at the Pine River Institute was that it's a complete deconditioning for 6 months in Algonquin Park with no exposure to newspapers, the internet, media, television, nothing like that, to get you out of that. It's almost like deprogramming somebody from a cult or something. And that's why, to me, this situation is alarming, and to write about these kinds of things, because I think philosophically it's something we need to discuss. And you're right. And here you were talking about drums. Dude, if you can get a hold of a drum kit, you should, because you got that smile on your face. And you know what? The electric garage sale, those types of places that have, cheap ink, buy it and just play with it just because you can. That's where the magic happens, that self-reliance experience that you say you can remember. Oh, I remember having this, with friends, or this experience. So do it. Even the stuff that we got at the school that was donated that wasn't great, we made it work. And that's when the kids were the happiest, and also talking about the other real issues inside of it. I guess that's why sometimes with my music, people are like, wow, that information's pretty heavy, man. But I'm like, well, it's okay. That means you're learning something. Somebody once said to me, when you're uncomfortable, that, and I'm artisans, not just myself. We're continually putting ourselves in these positions and trying to defuse them by using art in some way to reflect the moment, and it's not just a commodity. It's not, I want to be a superstar and an ego trip or a gold airplane. It's more about connecting and communicating with a mass of people. That's one of the big fall-in-loving experiences as a kid that I had, is when I saw Frosto, you're fine. Sorry, it's my dog. These experiences where he was like, I saw people responding this way to the message inside of those moments. So I couldn't help but not be like, my God, and then you see the other byproduct, of what it all is, which is, at my time, post-Vietnam, still the threat of communism and somebody dropping a bomb on your city, the duck and cover mentality, living with all of that. And then I saw how that empowered people's ability to fight their fear and to ask questions and to stand up and go, hey, man, we're not going to do this. You're going to throw these people out of their house? We're not going to let it happen. What do you mean she can't grow peppers on her front lawn? That's ridiculous. Like, that doesn't make any sense. There's all these little nickel and diming regulations that we've imposed on each other to the point that it makes people go, ah! That's the other, factor in behind it. And it makes me crazy. That's the other reason why I'm just like, do it. Grow food. If there's a bill that says you can't grow garlic in your garden anymore, my great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, brothers and sisters, and I all grow garlic. I plant 300 bulbs every year. So what? All of a sudden you're going to tell me I can't do it? That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So I think that's what I mean also too by this common sense revolution. Using art as that weapon, helps us me personally diffuse it. So I don't have those, I'm on what pharmaceutical because of my anxiety? I put my hand through what wall today because I'm angry about it?
Yeah. That's one thing I try and stress to as many people as possible is finding your passions early and kind of getting society. I feel like has this implementation where you grow up, you go to school, you get a job, and then you spend the rest of your life working that job. And I just, especially in the veteran community, I see all these people with skills and knowledge and abilities, and they fall into that trap of I got to put in my resume, I got to get this job. Like, find what you're passionate about and do that. Like, subtract the money from that equation and just do it. So like when I see musicians, I hung out recently with my cousin. He plays for J. Rody Walton in the Business, kind of a new band.
I have actually heard mumbles of that, yeah.
Yeah, so he's the bassist and vocalist for them. But I hung out with him, and I really admired his courage as a musician to follow his passion. I'm sure you had it as well. People that doubted you and wanted you to take a corporate job.
But that, in a way, that should also, I always say, the best thing you can say to a young musician, is that you'll never make it. Not like a crude uncle that's been drinking in a backyard that wants to abuse you. It's more like it's to motivate in a different way, and so the negative to the positive. For me, it's funny because my realization behind why it is that way for me is because, strangely enough, of the problem I had, which meant that passion, which was nurtured, like you said, at an early age, made me realize this is something I want to do with the rest of my life because they encouraged it so much. Come and play for, people would come over. Play that tune that I'm 5 years old sitting on a little chair with a broken lamp that looks like a microphone singing Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt to people and doing imitations of Alfred Hitchcock. And just because they knew my family that I struggled. So that's the other important thing of the family unit is, and that's the other thing working with kids. My parents don't understand me. And the parents, yes, they have this outlining, defining idea of what their kids want to do. But what I've seen and learned is that you may not always understand your kid's passion. But you need to encourage it in whatever way that it is, provided that it's not weird and strange, and it's not right. But like, I even had this issue with my brother, love you, man. And it's like, well, if his son, was into computer dynamics and building programs and all these things, and my brother's very automotive and mechanically inclined, he doesn't see the relationship yet because he's still thinking that way about it. I'm like, but dude, like, he's really smart and think about what he's building. And it's like, it's kind of a new way of thinking in terms of industry, and, don't poo-poo it, just support it. Right. But still, like, again, those mechanisms that, sort of define our rationale, we go, well, that can't be that way because this is the way it was. Well, yeah, it was. There are things from that point that are good, but we need to move forward in terms of thinking about that, right? So we live at I think, one of the most interesting moments in human civilization where we have any bit of information at the touch of our fingers. You and I can speak miles, thousands apart, just to, hey, how's it going? I'm in your spot. I'm in front of the fire. It's cold out here. It might be warm where you are. That never ceases to amaze me. how incredible this day and age is that we're in, and that, hey, you could talk about a band, and then all of a sudden I'd never heard of them, and I'll go tell my buddy about them, but because their records aren't here in our stores, well, that information just gets passed. It's so kinetic and this incredible, but at the same time, we're so defocused from our basic primary things that we're now considering in some cases antiquated. Like this whole concept of getting rid of the postal system. Do you know how many seniors rely on the postal system in order to get meds that they need or things for their homes if they're bedridden or different things? It's not going to come across the internet. You can't send a bottle of pills through the internet, and it may be impossible for them to go from A to B to get it. And so all of those kinds of things I think are important to weigh in our own cultural areas. And actually, it's funny, you were talking about the vets, and this is something I wanted to say before. Side of the Veterans Association is supporting people, trying to find them locations and jobs and fitting in when they get back. Does the Veterans Association have a part of it that's like, hey, you know what? Like you said, all these cats have these amazing skills. Is there some way that we can create then a small industry based on something that they can actually manufacture? So you're interjecting multiple sources of things back into the system between job creation, new innovation, providing those products built in your own country to people that actually want to buy them. All of those kinds of things. If you get me started really on free trade agreements and unilateral trade agreements because of the United Nations and everything, there's a lot of nefarious activity that's occurring inside of all that. And it never ceases to amaze me how many people go, it's not made here. And it's not that it's bad that it came from somewhere else, but it doesn't make sense. It's even the stuff with farming. I go pick up a tomato at the grocery store, and I go, what do you mean New Mexico? We got greenhouses and farms that are closing everywhere all over Canada because of free trade agreements that were passed in the 80s. And now people are scratching their head going, I wonder why. But then, like the song says in the lyric, I tell you the truth, but you think I was performing. When I point these things out to people, they go, no, that can't be. No. But it is. That's the truth and the reality of it. It's not conspiratorial. It's not from some Hollywood film. It's like if you've been alive long enough on the planet to be able to experience and pay attention to these things, you go, this is kind of what it is. You know, so doing that through the VA, that would make sense to me. And even if the vets themselves aren't getting that support through the Veterans Association, well, 5 or 10 people, like started any other union or group of people to support, they should do it themselves and just say, well, you're going to support us or not. Call the press.
That's kind of what I've been saying. Like the instant transfer of information, like you were talking about. I don't understand why there's so many disconnects in our society still between. Like my personal experiences with dealing with the VA. I'll set up an appointment. 2 months down the road, there's no follow-up. There's no, hey, your appointment's set up at this time. And when I show up, I get these blanket statements, and it feels very impersonal. And so most of the times, the best treatment I've ever sought has been hanging out with a ranger buddy. We're at a farm in the middle of nowhere, no Wi-Fi, no cell phone service, and we're just hanging out. We understand each other, and it just amazes me with technology and the advances that we have that there's so many issues in our society that get blanket covered over and don't get attention and don't get dealt with.
Well, Ben, I call it the great dumbing down, and it's that's what scares me the most, Chance, is that apathy. Because I look back 50 years ago into people's actions, even inside of the music industry and the civil rights movements and the transformation of that whole way of thinking about stuff. And I go, why aren't people, doing more about what this is? Because it greatly affects everybody. It's not just a pocket of some situation, and you still should help anybody out in those situations. But I get it. It's funny, even in the teaching system, with the amount of people that I know that teach, including my brother, we're all well aware of even that level of interest from students because of new technology. And as much as we're, prognostic or prolifically talking about how amazing it is, at the same time, like you say, it defocuses people. And instead of spending 2 hours reading, even online, about information that may be a trail of some interesting information, they get placated by Candy Crush Saga, and then, it's that whole thing. It's feeding the bad side of that ego again, and people are like, well, this is where also the crossroads between thinking about this on that common sense spiritual level, where you're thinking about just your fellow brother, your fellow man, the same people, your neighbors, the people that are going through the same struggles, from paying their bills to doing whatever they're doing. Like you said, talking to your ranger buddy, that's where you start to realize this, and then the public starts to empower themselves. Even if it's a bunch of vets that are going, hey man, that is a good idea. We should see if we can create, I'm just saying, some sort of a storage cell for people that you just plug it in and they can make power really quickly, and it's got an inverter on it so you can plug it into your 15 amp circuit and get power in your house. Like that, it's all doable. And then once you lead by example, and that becomes the mainstay of what people see, then they don't need or want to participate in that, or will get behind those people that are struggling because of those things. And there's so often in the past, like you won't remember this, and I shouldn't remember this because it's long before me, but many years ago in Toronto in the early 20s, kids that were 5 to 7 years old all got together and created a mass protest in Toronto to protest the 1 penny hike in the price of a Hershey's chocolate bar. They made their own signs. They were walking around on the street saying we were, and it was in the media, and go Google it, you'll see it. And here I think these kids, it's the kids that did that kind of a thing, not an adult in some heavy organized group of, no. Same thing here in Canada right now. This girl, if you ever want to have somebody interesting on your show, Rachel Parent or Rochelle Parent, she's 17. And she's one of the biggest proponents of the natural food movement and the right to know, which means if you're going to genetically modify food on multiple levels, we want to see that, like it says salt, sodium bicarb, whatever it is on it, it says GMO. So the public knows we're thinking about it. We'll be able to vote with our dollar and to say, hey, you know what? We're not going to buy that because we know what it is, and this is what people are saying. So maybe I'm not even going to take the chance, even if I don't know, to buy and eat that food. It's 17 years old. Not a 50-year-old man running an organization from the press club doing releases. But it's on a street level, and even on a political level. And this is what my dad would say to me, same thing. You have to realize the power is always in the hands of the people. They don't realize it. And what you have to understand is municipally is where everything occurs. The work, the time and energy people put in, the taxes that are paid, the people scurrying around every day, running to their jobs. That's where the country is alive and where there's a lot of honesty. I'm voting for Jim, for this election. He's a good guy. He came to my house, knocked on my door, canvassed, actually came here, and we talked for a while. I like Jim, blah, 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 whatever it is, right? But then on the next level, in Canada, provincially, your state, there's this baseline of collusion and coercion comes in from baseline lobbyist groups that are through the corporations and other things. On a federal level, that is even where it's worse, because there, the country itself is tied into multiple unilateral issues, and at the same time is being continually lobbied but the government is being lobbied by huge groups in order to change rules, regulations, in order to serve their purpose for the profit margins of their investors and all the other crazy stuff, which makes you realize that, like Mussolini said in the Second World War, this isn't fascism, this is a corporate dictatorship, which means that the corporations are making money. You think about how much money was made during the Second World War from selling armaments and jeeps and tanks, machinery, and all that kind of stuff. There's a huge amount of money that got pocketed there. And as much as I don't like to talk about that nefarious aspect of it, but it's true. Think about how much money Think about how much money Halliburton has made since 9/11. think. That's Cheney, man. And it's no coincidence that he sat in that position in government during the most crucial moment in American history when you're being invaded. And that whole thing, I still have to question because of that. I'll charge you, Chance, because you're a smart person. Go check out the incidents behind the Bay of Tonga, behind the Vietnam War. Go check out the Franz Ferdinand assassination from the First World War and the Black Arm and the relation to the Serbian crown. Go check out Prince Edward, Queen of England's son, okay? When he abdicated his position on the throne and marrying the wealthy heiress, he was one of the biggest Nazi sympathizers, giving money to Hitler's organization. This is family business, man, that is being run from behind the scenes that a lot of us don't know. And what alarms me is that, like you say, you bring this stuff up to people, and it's the fear of it that makes them not want to look at it, and also the distrust because of the way that the media and Hollywood and everything out there spins it to the point that it creates a blur between everything, so even the truth looks like a folly. You know, and that's you know, whenever I get a chance to talk to people, and it's funny, here's the other thing, aside from the music therapy that I did at that school, because it was, you know, run, privatized by a certain group of people and partially funded through the provincial government, I could kind of have open days with the kids other than doing music therapy to discuss these kinds of things. And you know, when you point out pitfalls to people, it changes their whole perception. Yes, it's a fearful thing, but at the same time, it's also empowering. I always say, never let any information frighten you, whether it's good or bad. Let it empower you in some kind of a way. And I learned this from the philosopher Krishnamurti. He wrote a book once, and he said, what would you rather have? If you came to the edge of a jungle, would you rather I tell you there was a tiger lying in wait, or would you not want to know? And when I was faced with that question in the book, immediately I go, I want to know. I want to know how to protect myself. I want to know what's going on, even if I have to fight that tiger. So for me, it's the same thing. Even if the information is hard to deal with, and I know I got to fight it or deal with it somehow, I want to know. And I want to ask. And taking things in this day and age with the way that things are, on face value, is not healthy.
Well, I think that's a mindset, and I hope more people now with technology the way it is, I mean, you have Instagram and all these motivational pages, it's a mindset shift from I want to know what's going on and I want to do something about it versus I want to turn the blinders on and pretend like it's not there. And a lot of people, I feel like, coming back post-military, that's how they are. And within the veteran community, I don't see that. Like, we will be tasked with, today you're hiking 25 miles. All right, it sucks, but sooner I start, sooner I finish. And I love seeing our community push that off into the people around us, because I do. I think it's a total mentality shift of the active, want to do something about it, knowing that life is a choice versus being negative, putting on blinders, pretending like the issue's not there. I see the guy on the side of the road and I'm not going to help him. And so, like with you went out to Jamaica, didn't you, recently?
Well, I've always had a passion about that place from the time I read Treasure Island to, you know, when I was a kid to my falling in love with Bob Marley's music, and Bunny Wailer, Peter Tosh, Jimmy Cliff, so many artists from the island from that time frame. So it was always a place my wife and I wanted to go. And we did. And when I went, I just felt like I was home from the moment I put my foot on the ground. And, we went to a resort, but we never spent any time there because within days we met musicians that were playing there and people that were working in staff, and just because we were so passionate about food, the cooks, and we were off the resort for like the entire time. And so we said, well, when we go back and when we keep going back, we're not going to do that ever again.
Local only.
So Wagwan, man. So we actually found a nice place called Real Jamaica, and it was a trash heap with dumpsters and old trucks and tires. And this reggae artist named Papa Curvin Merchant, bought it for a song because nobody wanted it, cleaned it up, built a few cabins plus a little house and a recording studio. And now in Orcabessa, just at Racecourse, kind of on your way to Kingston and whatever, outside of Ochi, it's right there, and it's a hub for musicians to come and hang. There's artist cabins, natural showers. You're right on the northern coast. Just down the road is UB40's house. It's just like this amazing thing. So, but for us, because we've met all these people, and they're now our friends, and in many cases, I was asked to be a godfather, my wife a godmother to one of the children. They're family. And we really want to make a big part of our life not only living there, but also too, people in the Western Hemisphere, and you must know this from being overseas, man, don't realize how lucky they are inside of their living environment. Every Jamaican might have a 21st century high-end cell phone, but not everybody has running water, a toilet, electricity, food every day. People don't realize that Jamaicans, you go to the resort, and I hear people going, what is with these Jamaicans? Don't they have enough money to finish their houses? The average Jamaican that works day and night sometimes makes about $130 in a fortnight in 2.5 weeks. You try to exist on a standard of living, because if you don't go to the grocery stores and shop, you don't know, unless you're brown or considered Jamaican friendly, what the actual prices are for existing on the island, even for meat and certain kinds of things like that. So it's pretty hard to move ahead. So my wife and I decided, look, it costs us next to nothing. Sometimes it extends us, but it's part of giving back, to buy shipping barrels, have them shipped, which takes longer, but you can put a lot more in a 50-gallon shipping barrel, and collect stuff from dollar stores that are 5 bars of soap for $1, or cooking oil, rice, clothes for the kids, shoes, books for school. We started telling our neighbors about it. They're bringing things over in their cars. We told our kids what you're doing. So here's clothes, here's pillows, and before you know it, instead of sending 1 or 2 shipping barrels at a time, we're sending 4 or 6. So the idea is, look, send it to many of our friends. One of the guys, police chief in Ochos Rios. There's another guy that runs the African Zionist Methodist Church there. Another one of our family members. So they all get together. Everybody comes. The barrels get open. Things are distributed. And people don't have to worry for a while. Now, we just do it. We don't have to be a part of an organization, sign up online. And when people ask me this, they say, well, where can you do this? I'm like, it's pretty easy. Just you do it. It's very easy to find somebody in need in this world. Everywhere I go, even in the United States, Canada, or I'm in overseas or in the island, I never ceases to amaze me how much, people need assistance of some kind. So even if it's, helping the old lady across the street with her grocery, it's all just a part, like you said, of the mindset. Instead of it being like, this is what I believe. No, this is what I do.
I love that. I mean, being overseas, I remember as you were speaking, instance, we drive out of the gate and there was this almost like hotel-looking building. We called it Russian Flats, because it was there from the Russians and all destroyed. And just to see the kids, they'd be throwing like dead chickens around and like a pretty much dump. And like they were happy. They'd run up to the cars and we'd throw them some water and they just lit up. And so I think about the things that we complain about in our society and even the issues that we turn a blind eye to in our country. But it's a choice to be happy and be positive, but it's a choice to be proactive. And like once somebody sees that effort that you throw the starfish back in the sea, then somebody else jumps up and they're next to you throwing the starfishes back in the sea. And so I like that, how when you got started, you and your wife got started with that more people wanted to get involved. And I'd like to see that on a global movement of people just putting out their fears and what they're afraid of and getting involved with helping out more people. and just creating that massive movement just with one person effort.
Well, and like shows like yours and this topic and other things make that kinetic. They make that work. If we don't talk about it and don't do it or demonstrate it or describe it in some way, then nobody knows. And that's the most important thing, again, about this amazing time that we live in, is that that's our choice. And when it starts to happen, then it's amazing. It's really amazing to see and refreshing to see. Because, as you know, we live at a crazy time, too, as amazing as it is. So, and leading by example, I think, is the key. I mean, the shoving it down your throat mentality just makes people afraid and pushes people away. So if you see it, that's for me even big part of the learning experience. You can't, on a voyeuristic level, not part of the learning experience is the visual of it. So aside from reading about it or taking a course on it or anything else, you go, wow, that's pretty cool. They're doing it, And I guess that's why I asked you the question about the VA through that kind of a thing, because it started me thinking even about the Aboriginal communities here and the amount of homeless that are on the streets that are Aboriginal. And instead of the system, again, ignoring the pleas of people, they're saying, look, we need assistance for these people on the streets. The Aboriginal communities got together, raised money, bought small trucks, built like counters in them for providing soup and blankets and stuff and things like that. And instead of waiting for the government to do anything about it, they just do it. It's the same thing. Like, people need help now. So, like, why are we waiting for a letter to tell us that we can or get some sort of assistance? And if the public sees it and they're willing to help and they know it's not coming from, some clandestine space and we're doing it, it's happening. Look, we're doing it right here. Here's the truck. People are eating. These people were sleeping on a grate 5 minutes ago. We're just trying to warm them up and make sure they're not frozen. And that's what I'm getting at, And those kinds of things exist in places. It's just we need to talk about them more, as opposed to always amplifying the negative in that regard. Even I was on a radio show last night, and I love being on this show, but sometimes when you're always looking at it from it's coming, we're being attacked, and we always live with this fear. It's my grandfather was in the Austro-Hungarian War. And he would, he's a very brave man. He escaped from a prisoner of war camp, was shot in the leg. In doing so, they had to cut a hole in a train that was slowly moving. They slipped through the hole in the train and slipped out between the wheels of the tracks while the train was moving. And he would roll up his pant leg every Christmas. It seemed to be like a tradition. And he'd show me the spot where the bullet came through the calf, like out at the back, through the shin kind of a thing. And when I was a kid, and I was 5, because he died when I was 5, he'd say, you see this, Eddie? And I'd say, yeah. And he'd say, that's from a rich man's game. And I would go, I didn't get it at 5, right? And my grandfather always said, hey, you want to fight a war? I'll tell you what, because I've been through it. I've been gassed. I've been shot. I've been put in a camp, da-da-da-da-da. He goes, you get the leaders of both countries together with some gloves. We'll see who the last man is standing. Then that's the winner. Yeah, let's do it the right way. Who's really running this country? So those early things were in me from people that had lived in those experiences, and we're trying to find exactly what you're talking about, that sense of peace again and prosperity. And my grandfather, the reason I'm even here is because he saw what was about to happen at the beginning of the Second World War. And he was disowned by his family. And the guy that gave him a job and sponsored him to come to Canada was a rabbi who he met in the prisoner of war camp. And he built coffins for 2 years so he could make money to bring my grandmother and my rest of my family here. So the circumstances that we find ourselves in, I just finished writing the lyric, the scars you get today make you stronger somehow in some way. Even the negative, you have to learn to re-amplify in some way, It's like I said, it's a beautiful and crazy time we live in. But we have the knowledge of it, Chance. We have the reality that we can see it for what it is and go, okay, let's do this. Just because we can. Just because we can.
Completely agree. Earlier we were talking about the Veterans Day release, Heart Songs for Veterans. How'd you first get hooked up with them?
Well, I was playing down in New Jersey, and I friended a number of people just through the whole experience because it's, Jersey's great. I love Jersey. I love New York. Man, Texas. I love the States, period. There's a lot of people that are really still excited about music. I love Canada. I love Canadians. I don't love the cold. But conservative to a fault sometimes here that makes them reluctant to participate in that kind of stuff. And I love you, Canada, but it's true, Um, yeah, Jill was just, hey, we were friends, and Mike Stover through the management said, Jill's got this thing that she's putting together, and a couple weeks later she approached me, and Mike said, hey, you know what, I know you're working on this record. Have you got anything bubbling, like that might work? And I'm always writing. I'm always, I never know when a grouping of songs is all going to kind of fall together. But this song for me, because of the subject matter, was a part, like I said, of that red omen thing, the message. And red is a duality color. I love the red blocks behind you because in nature, as you know, certain berries you can eat because they're not poisonous, and some certain species of animals are colored red because they're dangerous, so other animals don't eat them. It's a duality in that. And an omen is the same thing. An omen is, could be seen as a good thing. I see it as a good omen that a dove landed on the roof and there's a rainbow, or at the same time, an omen can be a warning. Something is starting to show itself in some kind of a way. And like I said, those lyrics I thought potent, considering it is about helping your fellow man in whatever situation. But let's think about why we're in the situation that we're in. The second verse of that song says, we jump through a hoop while someone is consorting. I'm going to lay one down. And as I said before, I tell you the truth, but you'd think I was performing. I'm going to lay one down. Lay one down for my brothers. Lay one down for my foe. Lay one down for one another. Lay one down and let it go. Lay one down and put asunder. Lay one down, reap what you sow. Lay one down, man, it's like butter. Lay one down and let it flow. So it's always saying these dualities inside of them, and it becomes the choice again. So I thought, without being Trojan horse-like about it, although artists are trying to be clever about what they're saying, hopefully that message of love and, excuse me, because I get very emotional thinking about it, non-aggression translates in some way for people in their hearts and shakes them up, gets them off the carousel for just a minute and gets them thinking about what that is. Because, I even last night on the radio, and it was like, Muslims this and Muslims that and da-da-da-da-da. Man, I got good friends that are Muslims. I've got good friends that are Jews, Christians, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Russian, German. It doesn't matter because they're good people. They're doing good things. They're trying to raise a family and live their lives happily, just like we all want. So to me, I see there being a lot of pitting of that anxiety, especially through the media. Man, I wrote a tune years ago called "Throw Your TV Sets Out." I heard once the biggest hypnotist that we have in this world all exists in the corner of our homes. It's called your television, and the best thing you can do is throw the damn thing out.
I agree. I think it's easy to be told what to believe. I think it's easy to be told how to think, how you're supposed to live your life. And it's easy to be angry and to blame a certain group. Even in my experiences overseas, there were good people and there were bad people. They both had the same religion. We went after the bad people. So it's easy to take a blanket mentality. That I'm supposed to think this way and not like this certain group, so I'm going to fall into that. But
yeah,
that's ignorant and that's small-minded, and I think a lot of people do it out of fear.
Well, you know what? Chances like the fear and the anger is the baseline for just one emotion in the human existence. Like, I was on a jury for 4.5 months, sequestered. It was crazy. And at the point where, you're all deliberating and Here I'm getting emotional, but I don't mind doing that. I'm a guy and I don't care. I'll tell you that straight, because that means you show your humanity. Anger, fear, happiness, joy, elation, anxiety, all of those things need to be amplified in some way, because they are a visual indicator, other than anger, which we know there's a lot of that flowing around, as to how humans feel. It's just like you can't help but not feel at a funeral. There are a bunch of people standing around crying. The reality of that is sadness. Well, that's okay. It's okay to show it there. It can be shown in multiple places. Tears can come even from a form of joy. You know, it's like my brother made me these deck chairs once in his class down at school or whatever. He brought them over. I was totally surprised. I started to cry. He's like, "What are you doing crying, man?" I'm like, "Dude, I think it's a really nice gift. What do you want me to say?" You know? That's one of the things that we have to remember, is that, you know, this is not a sign of weakness. In more cases, I've seen it as a sign of strength, because people are coming to grips with the emotion of it as opposed to suppressing it. And there's a lot of suppression of that, and that's not healthy. It's not healthy to keep pushing that down and pushing that just like a time capsule ready to pop, just, you know. And some people have the ability to deal with it because they have the vents and the mechanisms, but others don't. Think about how much of society is on some sort of pharmaceutical because of their anxieties.
Well, that's part of my disconnect with the VA, is I feel like they give blanket statements. They have a receipt for your prescription to pick up, and that's their answer. But when I hang out with my buddies and we go out and just enjoy life together, that embraces that humanity aspect. Somebody that relates to me, that we enjoy doing the same thing.
Does the rest of the community know that you guys do that? Like, do you have an open door policy?
Yeah, and I see that more now since I've started the podcast.
Cool.
I'm able to research different companies and see how they got started. Well, it started up 2 guys that just started painting guns, and now they paint prosthetics for amputees to restore that sense of pride. And now they have a cabin that you can go for the weekend and hang out and shoot guns down in Texas. A couple buddies in Virginia, they have some horses and a farm. If you're in the area, go to the farm and hang out. And so it's just starting with that, where one person connects with another person and brings in more people. I love it, because the more that I've been involved trying to get the podcast going, I've been able to see more people that are doing this. But you don't see it unless you search for it, and oftentimes it's easy to search for negativity. You can just go on social media and there it is. But it's
Tell me, man.
It's hard to find good and then make yourself be a part of that good.
But you're doing it. You're doing something amazing, and it's happening now. And as it grows, you can recollect. I mean, it's hard to see it in the moment sometimes. That's strange as we are as people. That even the little achievements sometimes aren't enough, because we're always so concerned with time. You know, in the grand scheme of things, we're the blink of an eye in the cosmos. But at the same time, I understand the feeling of urgency and the importance of it, because your life, everybody's life, is affected by it somehow. So when that happens, whether it's talking to someone like me because I'm sharing it and we're having a great conversation, I hope that translates, because I know vet buddies of mine that'll go, "Great interview, Ed. Like, I'm going to share this because I got a buddy down in such and such that might be interested in going to that ranch and checking out some horses and just shooting crap with some buddies for the day." All of that is how it works, because we're not, even as an independent artist, as much as I'm busy and I'm working and doing what I do, I still don't get a lot of support from the mainstay media, as we know, to discuss these kinds of things. So if we're not doing it on that grassroots level with ourselves, then we're just, just as bad as the problem.
I agree. So Heart Songs for Veterans, do you guys do a portion of your sales and donate it to veterans and charities?
Yep, absolutely. Half of the proceeds go to veterans. Part of the proceeds go to the campaign that Amazon and iTunes did, and a small percentage comes back to me writing the tune, which is nice. I'm happy about a little compensation for any effort that anybody does. So even just having the acclamation right now is huge for me, because Chance, just like connecting with people is the biggest part of it. So if I'm talking about things every day inside of the music and what's going, it's so healthy. I'm working, whether I got, a bank account, I don't care about that. I just want to pay my bills, and function and work. I think that's what the baseline is for a lot of people. It's like, even in the music industry, people ask me about what I do and being famous. Like, to me, the same people that I aspired to be like never wanted that moniker. They did what they did, and they became prolific because of their stature and their abilities, and they recognize it for that. Some of the people that I've met that you think, man, like, you met who? And they hugged me, and they asked me my name, and we talked for a while. Whereas I've heard other stories about artists that won't even get a kid that's dying of cancer in the hospital an autograph. Things that are like that make me just go, I can't be a part of that. So the industry is a really weird place, and most artists that I know look, we put this time and energy into what we do, just like hiring a plumber to us almost at this point. So copper pipes are in, got your new sink, taps are installed, should be good on the hot water furnace, no problems, here's your bill. In the same thing with the industry today, because the way that music and art is looked at, like a lot of things, like you said, doesn't seem like people participate. We just want to recoup. If we put $5,000 into a musical project, just to at least pay that back, or to know that we're getting a fair shake at a gig when, people say, well, come play in Austin, but we can't give you any money and you got to drive 30 hours just for the exposure. It's really hard, So for me, and for a lot of artists, that's what it is. We just want to function and keep doing it so we can practice our crafts, just like anybody, right?
Well, that's one thing with a lot of my friends and a lot of the charities that I stand behind is, like, I have one buddy, Nick Irving, he's New York Times bestseller and has a TV show coming out, but it's not about him. Like, he constantly is putting back into the people he served with in different charities. So I love being in the veteran community and seeing that, how when people succeed, they pass that on so the people around them can succeed as well. So it's not just me having a full plate, but everybody at my table eats. Are there any charities that really stick out to you that you've...
Well, definitely Cancer Society, because I've had a number of people in my family affected by it, and survivors. My mom, both of my sisters. I do the Relay for Life every year, and the band contributes our time to that. That's a big deal for me because, like, man, and because I'm so passionate about food and agriculture, and this is also a touchy subject, is, the cure. As well as I do, man, healthy mind, healthy body, it all kind of works together, right? You don't even need a lot of training to understand that, just a good set of parents that give you those life skills. So, to me, when I see people eating pharmacologically poorly, and the increase in many ways on a dietitian level, the parallels between a lot of issues that are now commonplace, I can't help but not draw a conclusion to that. So, for instance, when genetically modified foods enter the market on a multitude of levels, and you have to understand, it's not just the genetically modified foods, it's how many pesticides and things that we spray on foods through corporate farming. And this is why I'm always talking about growing your own garden, community gardening, that it's completely sustainable on multiple levels. That if you're putting poisons like that into your body, even on a microscopic level, over a period of time, your body can't deal with it, and it manifests itself in so many ways. And I've listened to so many talks from biologists and people that study this. You think of it, the human civilization is developed with food hand in hand for generations, centuries, if not thousands of millennium, okay? All of a sudden, you go ahead and you change those basic premises of the peptide bonds, the proteins, the way all those things start to manifest in the system. Your body, and they know this, can't cope with a change continually happening all the time, as opposed to look at corn as a baseline thing and think of the people that Mesa, the oldest form of grindable, tradable, commodity, workable in multiple ways sources has now been altered to the point that even in parts of South America and New Mexico, those old strains have been wiped out because of the genetically modified crops. This is happening in Jamaica. Trust me, when I talk to people in Jamaica and they're getting seeds from the government-sponsored seed banks and they wonder why they can't save their seeds to germinate the next year, and I tell them, well, because of the suicide gene and the looks on their faces are like, you're kidding me. And I'm like, no. And so some of the things I send in barrels are seeds, my own seeds, corn, tomato seeds, pepper seeds. Share them, spread them around the island. Pass them around. Once they've saved 50 cobs, dry them, give them to other people. You don't need to do this. And then the parallel, so for me, and when I see my own family going through those, and I remember this point, when my dad ended up with multiple sclerosis in the 80s, things really changed in my family dynamic in terms of the way we were eating, because my dad wasn't healthy, we weren't gardening, we were buying more processed foods. Within 5 to 10 years, 4 people in my family all had Crohn's disease. And then I go, what? And so for me, I'm always talking, look, the cure, yes. But what is the cause? What are we doing to ourselves and in our environment? And how do we change what that is just to empower people in their own backyard? Because to me, it's great having a green lawn, having some beers with the buds, sitting out in the back porch, barbecuing. Everybody's having a good time. But man, I'd rather see vegetables just going to town. So that every time in the morning I could get up and walk 20 feet and pick fresh tomatoes and lettuce and peppers and onions and anything you can think of that is so easy to do. And you know what? When your kids are involved and they see you getting involved and excited about it, this is why I'm into this. My dad would pick up a cucumber out of the garden. It'd be like this big and he'd be coddling it like a child. He'd be so proud of it. That it was because we just did it. We did it with our hands. It wasn't a chore. It was magic. And that's what a young kid at a very early age, so impressionable, when they see mom and dad doing that and just having fun, they're going to remember that experience their whole life. There might be that tilt mechanism through the 15 to 20-somethings where they're figuring themselves out and going to college. But I guarantee you, once they get into the work market and they're buying groceries, they're going to realize, what do you mean I can save how many thousands of dollars every year growing food in my backyard? And I know that they're clean and safe, and I can share some with my neighbors, and I can give some to my family. Man, that's living life. 2 hours a day of your life. Nothing. In the morning, pour a cup of coffee, go out, pull some weeds, check the plants, make sure things are watered, da-da-da-da-da-da. In the evening, finish work, come home, finish dinner, go outside, pour another coffee, go outside, da-da-da-da-da, do a few things. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. And you know what's weird is because 50, 60 years ago, post-World War II, the Victory Gardens, everybody in the United States was like in a championship growing competition with vegetables in their backyard. I think that's pretty damn cool. That's where all those things popped up at, family or fall fairs, and there'd be these judging competitions for the biggest pumpkins and who made the best jam, and Lois Anderson won Blue Ribbon Prize for her best blueberry pie. That's the community getting together and prospering on that level, just because it comes from their own zones. So we're passionate, man, about what we do, and that's the most important thing, because that's what translates. Just like the anger comes from a point of passion too. I understand anger, and it sometimes is necessary, but at the same time, if you convert that into a different way, then it's a whole other realm. It's a whole other realm.
Well, I think the positivity is contagious. Like you see your dad out farming and working hard, and you see that, and you're like, I want to do that as well. The Ranger buddies that have the farm in Virginia, they raise grass-fed Angus. I wake up, and my Ranger buddy, he We got put on hold. You still there?
Yeah, something happened there.
I'm not sure.
Sorry, you're Black Angus. I'm
So
fixated.
they raised grass-fed Angus, and one of them, he was, that that wrestler build, perfect American hero, solid guy, and then got hit by a drunk driver when he was still in Ranger Battalion. So multiple surgeries and completely messed up his leg. But when I hung out with him recently, to see him wake up in the morning, go check to make sure the baby calves are all right. Chickens and turkeys run around the farm. They have their vegetable garden. No Wi-Fi signal, no cell phones, and just still waking up productive. Like, that motivates me. And I think, positivity and motivation, all those things are contagious. And why not spread positivity than negativity? And anger in itself, I think, is a very, very shallow tool. As you said, it can be used. But once you dissect it, like, what are you angry about? Okay, that's really sadness. Why are you sad? Okay, I'm lacking the connection I had before. That's where the anger rooted. And so I don't see that with the VA, and I've noticed that for myself. Is I was angry when I left the service. Why? Because I was sad. Why? Because I missed the brotherhood. Well, the brotherhood's still there. You just, now leaving out of the service, connect with other people that feel the same way.
Right.
So,
well, and that feeling too, it's like, I mean, having cattle, man, and cleaning out a barn, as arduous it is, bedding it down, having the animals in there in the middle of winter all breathing and warm, and I feel more alive in those moments. People are like, oh, farm work, and it's not about that. It's about that, like you just said. You get up in the morning, you go check the chickens, you check the calves, you make sure the water troughs are running. It all becomes part of that good mechanism in life experience that makes you go, aside from, like you just said, the job and getting the thing and paying the bills and da-da-da-da-da, that's more living it as opposed to just paying for it, for the life experience. It's like when I hear other cats, too, they're out in the field doing research or something because I'm interested in whatever they're doing. Like, well, you're not going to find out what's going on the couch. You got to go out and do it, right? Like, it's the same thing. You're not going to know if you're a good performer unless you pick up an instrument and go practice your craft on a stage in front of people and fight it like a lion tamer. You got to do those things, right? So when I hear you say that, it gives me a lot of comfort because, again, talking to so many vets and the experiences that they've had, and now the feelings that they have about life, it makes me really realize, wow, you guys are thinking about this whole thing in a way that a lot of people who have fear about what this is don't see. So I'm happy to do a show like this with you and talk to other people so they can see that. Even the times that I've been in the U.S. and people say, well, hey, man, what are the Canadians' impressions of the people in the United States? Like, there's a lot of Canadians that are, like I say, ultra-conservative to a fault, but that also means that they're extremely judgmental. And that, everybody's got a gun. You're going to get shot when you go to McDonald's and da-da-da-da-da. I could have that experience in Kingston, Jamaica. I've seen more violent behavior in Jamaica than I have in the United States. And at the same time, it's comforting, like I said, talking to people like this and playing there because I go, wait a minute. That could happen. Could happen in Canada. Could happen in Russia. It doesn't matter where it is. But if we feed it and allow it to be that way, it's just going to work. I don't want to be afraid anymore. You know what I'm saying, man?
I agree.
I'm tired of it.
So we're running out of time quickly. How can everybody get in touch with you? Do you have a website, any social media links?
Yeah, edroman.net is my website. You can get the Ed Roman app for free on iTunes, and it connects you to all my social media, from Facebook, which is Ed Roman Music on Facebook, or Special Ed Roman on Twitter, or Special Ed Roman on YouTube, where you see all my videos. And I do a lot of cooking, talk about gardening, as well as all my music videos, stuff working with students, all sorts of stuff on there. And I'm always apt to a chat. My students used to say, Ed, you never shut up.
Well, Ed, I want to thank you again. I really appreciate you taking your time out to do this episode with me, and it's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you again.
Chance, my pleasure. And thank you to Jen, or Jill. It was nice meeting you. Jen, sorry.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, Chance, you have a good day. Stay in touch, eh?
I will.
Thank you, man.
Peace.
Peace, for sure.